Thank you very much. So welcome to Sheffield. This is my home building, The Wave, and it's my very great pleasure to introduce Sheila Webber as the keynote for the second day of the LILAC conference here. So if information literacy had a hall of fame, Sheila wouldn't just be in it, she'd probably be the one writing the induction speeches. With a career spanning 30 plus years and a collection of accolades like the UK E-Information Group Jason Faradane Award for services to information science, honorary fellowship from CILIP and the Virtual Worlds Educator Award, she spent more time defining this field than most of us have spent checking our emails, which I imagine is probably quite a lot for most of us. So for the past 30 years, Sheila's research and teaching focus has been information literacy and information behaviour. And with her longtime collaborator, Bill Johnston, she developed a definition of information literacy in 2004 that is unique in highlighting the relationship between information behaviour and information literacy. Her research into conceptions of information literacy with phenomenography has uncovered disciplinary differences in the focus of what academics conceive of as information literacy. Sheila has supervised groundbreaking international PhDs studies on diverse aspects of information literacy, everything from serodiscordant couples in Malawi to school librarians in Syria and primary educators in Pakistan. Sheila is a long-time advocate of information literacy as a discipline, starting with her position paper with Bill Johnston in 2005 and continuing this work with her membership of the board of the international collaboration ILIAD, Information Literacy as a Discipline, with a forthcoming book, Information Literacy Handbook, Charting the Discipline, so look out for that. Sheila has been a member of the UNESCO Working Group on Media and Information Literacy and co-chaired the UNESCO Mill Alliance European subchapter. She has a strand of research and activity, the Age-Friendly Media and Information Literate Cities, again with Bill Johnston, with a range of publications and conference presentations that explore the roles of older people in media and information literacy as creators, critics and innovators, as well as consumers of information. She's keen to examine the representation of older people in the media and to address bias and stereotypes of older people. Sheila is an expert and innovative educator and a passionate advocate for constructivist and inquiry-based education, which she enacts to great effect in her own teaching. She certainly ignited my interest in information literacy when I studied her module. She's a fellow of the SILAS, the Centre for Inquiry-Based Learning in the Arts and Social Sciences here at Sheffield. And Sheila was an early adopter of the virtual world Second Life and attracted media interest for her avatar, her digital extension, as she calls it, Sheila Yoshikawa, described by The Guardian as a blue-haired babe and cultivator of a Japanese garden. Sheila developed an innovative Second Life island for information students to explore the concept of information literacy using inquiry-based pedagogies. Sheila's Second Life educational work was acknowledged in her award for the University of Sheffield Senate Award for Sustained Excellence in Teaching in 2017. And she's continued this passion and now leads the Virtual Worlds Education Roundtable in Second Life, and in 2023 received an award for her work from the International Virtual Worlds Best Practice in Education team. She's developed material on play in virtual worlds for the University of Sheffield Future Learn MOOC, Exploring Play, which has run numerous times. One of Sheila's enduring and important contributions to information literacy is her information literacy blog, which has been providing a global perspective on information literacy teaching and practice since 2005. The over 6.7 million page views are testament to the wide readership and the value that Sheila has created, with a broad range of stimulating content covering summaries of new scholarly material, adverts for information literacy events, and conference live blogging, including this one, if you want to keep up with what we're up to, and supporting this promotional work with some very, very beautiful photos. Sheila's keynote is entitled Information Literacy in a Time of Polycrisis and Cherry Blossom, and promises to take us through an adventure of self-discovery of our information worlds and what information literacy means to us as individuals. So please join me in welcoming a genuine pillar of the information literacy world, Sheila Webber. you want to pass this?
So, thank you, Pam. For those of you who work in academia, I've already, I think, got a lateness penalty for late submission of my slides, and so I apologize for the delay at the start. I'd also blame Microsoft and Google for the problems. The leaves that I've given out are definitions created by our students. We have in total over 100 students who joined us this year for the first time on our part-time distance learning program and the on-campus librarianship program. And one of the first things that we do is we're using Carol Coulthard's inquiry learning, where you start by triggering people's curiosity by opening topics, and one of them is obviously information literacy. So there's a short video, but then we ask people to post to a Padlet what their idea of information literacy is at that point in time. And I do think it's interesting to see the variety that people have right at the start, where they're starting to step back and think, well, what does it mean to me? And hopefully they also develop their ideas through the semester, and we do ask them to reflect on that, but the kind of big exercises at the start. So I didn't want to, I know each year I think this is really interesting, well, it interests me anyway. So I asked permission of the students who'd actually named themselves, because they don't have to name themselves on a Padlet, whether they'd be willing to have their definitions given out. And then I asked them whether or not they wanted their name, and if so, what form they wanted their name in. So I've asked their permission for this. They're really kind of souvenirs. I was inspired by Jenna Hartle, who's an information science researcher, and she gave a conference at the European Conference on Information Literacy, where she does amazing videos on information science, and she gave out kind of a kind of scroll which represented some key things that were in her videos. And she said she liked to give out souvenirs, so I decided to make, and these, also as a child, Blue Peter, some of you may still remember what Blue Peter was, so I handcrafted these. They were all cut out separately by me, but I thought it was, I hoped you find it nice to go away with someone's idea about information literacy, and obviously there's 49 different ones, so I am going to ask the students after the class if they're willing to have it compiled into a list and put that on my blog, but again, I haven't yet asked their permission to do that. So, as I said, I think I put it there also to illustrate the variety. Even there's a lot of overlap, obviously, between the definitions, but there are also unique features in many of the different definitions. So that's all before we've actually got to the title slide. So reflecting on information literacy in the time of polycrisis and cherry blossom, and this is indeed in Second Life. There's just one creation from AI that I've used, which is I'm using to illustrate AI. So I've got an ambiguous relationship because I do like making visualizations and subscribe to Midjourney, but now I feel kind of guilty when I use it. So I'm not using it very much. But in Second Life with 3D virtual worlds, I take photos. And I thought of polycrisis because I'll be talking about that later on, but I feel we are in a time of polycrisis, multiple crises which kind of intersect. And the cherry blossom was partly because I like cherry blossom. I get really happy at this time of year. This is my favorite time of year. And I knew there'd be some cherry blossom around. I thought it would be in fuller bloom because about a week ago it looked like it would be. But that's one of the things about cherry trees, that they come into blossom at different points. So it's also a symbol of transience, but also the fact that even when awful things are going on, human beings still can find joy in small things, like seeing a tree in bloom. So I suppose my big takeaway message, which some of you won't need any convincing about at all, is that information literacy is a thing. The reason why Bill Johnson and I decided we'd say information literacy is a discipline in the early 2000s was that some people were saying, oh, well, actually, it's not even a subject because it's got to be embedded in other subjects. But more and more, as there's more and more literature about it, research about it, conferences like this, which have been there over time, which are building a knowledge base, I think you can definitely say that information literacy is a thing. And the QR code, that's the one for if you want to make any comments or questions. So the outline of my talk is reflecting on information, which is quite a big, that's bigger chunk of this. Reflecting on information literacy, reflecting on the roots and knowledge base of information literacy, briefly defining polycrisis, and then reflecting on information literacy in a time of polycrisis and cherry-blossom. So first of all, reflecting on information. I put that in quote marks. I thought I could have been like those authors that have these mock quotes at the start of every chapter and make up names, but actually I'm quoting myself there. There is an ongoing project about looking at essence of information literacy, where a group of us are kind of reflecting on that. And I found when I started reflecting, I thought that at the heart of information literacy is information. It really matters, it's information literacy. And so one of the things I was very involved with is something called the Institute of Information Scientists, which merged in the early 2000s with what was then called the Library Association to form CILIP. I wrote an article in which I was reflecting on what kind of discipline information science was, and in the process of that discovered these earlier authors. And this will actually connect later on where I'm bad-mouthing someone who's saying information science hasn't got beyond thinking about information as bits and bytes. Bertie Brooks was a pioneer in information science in the UK, and I like this part of his, one of his articles, where he says that life is a continuous information process in which physical, genetic, sensory, and cognitive components all act together. And Brooks was a scientist, like many of the early information scientists. The scientist's primary source of information is not the scientific journal, but nature itself. And so even though he was seeing things from a scientific perspective, he was aware that information was more than kind of something that you did in the lab. I'm also going to use Marcia Bates' categories of information in the next slide. And I'm not going to try and explain in depth her definition, but she's looking at kind of the world and seeing how stuff is organized into patterns, and that's what makes the information, whether it's kind of inside physical objects or in human beings. And these categories, the genetic information is what's kind of embedded. Say, we've got some peregrine falcons. I don't know if any of you knew about that. In the there's a church which is part of the campus, the main campus, and that's had peregrines breeding there. At the moment, they're sitting on the eggs, but kind of the genetic information that makes the chicks know kind of to tear at the pieces of raw pigeon when their parents bring it to them, which you can see in all its glory on the webcam that we have for that. Experienced information, the feeling of being in life, the memories, the information we have inside ourselves. And expressed information communicated through gestures, sense, and language. The exosomatic information is the information outside our bodies, so we've got the experienced information kind of inside us. And the pattern of organization of the enduring effects of the presence of animals on Earth would include the kind of social organization that is put into arranging objects like in this actual room that we're in at the moment that you recognize. And Bates gives the example, I think, of walking into kind of government waiting room, and you know what's expected of you because of the arrangements of the kind of architecture. The recorded information is what's generally everyone would call information that's been expressed and is digital or print. And residue is traces, so kind of like archaeological traces or also digital traces. So that's obviously a bigger definition of information than you get in some cases, which may focus more on documents. And I was just looking for a kind of visual example. In Ballarat, Australia, these are actually taken from a slide set, they had an idea of trying to get less violence, having staff assaulted, yes, because people were getting frustrated in the waiting rooms. And they had a program of different kinds of information, which included videos and signage and leaflets and a busyness indicator, which showed how busy the room was, which I thought was very interesting because you can see kind of flow chart. One of them's got a flow chart, and then another, the first poster is kind of telling you what's going to happen in that particular area. So this all seemed very good. It did also strike me how overwhelming hospitals are, because particularly looking at that one where it says triage and administration, and there's a business indicator, and also there's all the human beings giving their information, being looking ill or distressed, and so forth. So there's a lot of information there going on, and although this is my critique, and in fact it did seem that having all this extra information did calm people down and lead to less violence. It's a real issue in somewhere like a hospital or indeed a university, where you've got all this different kind of information that you want to tell people, but it's really overwhelming, I know, particularly for some people. I was thinking, so I'm going to be asking you in a moment to think about the information you're getting in this room at this very time. So I thought I'd start just by giving an example of a photograph I took yesterday of coming in and how this would be different depending on who you are. So I come in, and if there's been some other conference, I would have thought, oh, there's an event on. I can see all these people kind of wandering about, there's tables set up, and I know that because of this is what the Wave looks like when there's an event on in there. There's other things I'm familiar with because this is the building I come into every day for work. And so I almost don't, looking at the photograph, I don't really even notice there's being the kind of sign up at the top. One of the problems with this building is it's got curved walls, so they're actually restricted as to where they can actually put the information. And sometimes the best place for the information is just not available because they can't do curved signs, I think, for some reason on the whole. And so it's up in the air, and then there's the reception desk. And so it's going to be a different information experience for everyone. Also, I took a picture outside, and for me, there's associations because I have been on, I've been on strike and picketing this particular building, which also changes your relationship with the building when you've been stood outside it with a kind of placard picketing there. And so for me, obviously, it's going to be a rather different information experience coming into the building with this combination of different kinds of information than it is for one of you that's never been to the Wave before. So now, if this works, I'm going to ask you to just reflect for a moment about the information here and now in the room, and I'm going to start a woo clap and with two questions: what in this room is informing you right now, what's it telling you, or how do you feel about it? You can only put in 30 characters, or it splits it up at the spaces. So if you put in 3 words and it's too long, it would put it into, it would you'd have 3 individual words. So the code is LILAC 26, but I'm just going to show you the woo clap page. I'll give people a moment to do that. Well, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I can't do anything about the temperature. Okay. I'm not sure if that's. So someone's saying can't hear. Is it that? Am I close enough to the microphone, or perhaps I was a bit further away? So inevitably, your eye goes to the most critical thing. Well, perhaps that isn't. Perhaps there's someone who's got this is complete crap or something, and I haven't spotted it yet. But one thing I'd pick out of it is that there's a variety of feelings. It reinforces the idea that in education, the actual physical experience of sitting on hard seats and being in a cold room is, which, as I said, sometimes you keep complaining but you have no control over it, is an interesting thing that can engage with us. And that physical information can override everything else. But someone's saying room not cold, which also shows that people have different tolerances, body temperatures. Perhaps I'll disclose, I have hot flushes still. It's been 20 years now. That's not a good message for people who hope to get rid of them soon, but I've had them for 20 years. So I feel differently about room temperature than I did before. I can't even actually remember what it was like, but I think I have different experiences. So I'll get back to my slides. But apart from trying, getting interesting information about your physical experience, it was also identifying that there's a huge amount of information in any one space, which is combining with the information that you might be trying to engage people with. And that's always an important thing to think about from a teaching point of view, but also when you're thinking about people's information literacy in their lives. I'll put that into thought. Also, I wanted to use these three examples of visual imagery, which is around us a lot and being created at a greater rate. 3 ways of looking at cherry blossoms. So again, thinking about how people might engage with these, what kind of information it might conceivably convey, and how just the way in which they're created is going to affect the way in which you might be consuming or engaging with a visual. So one of them is cherry blossom by the tram stop behind Sheffield University. So you may have actually seen them. They were in full bloom about a week and a half ago, but I think there's still a bit of blossom there. And for the rest of the year, they're green trees, but at this time of year, they're really kind of a burst of blossom. And so it's possible that people, me having said that, might have, because I think some of you will have come here perhaps via using the tram behind the station. Those in Sheffield would have probably used it a lot. That immediately you might be visualizing, oh, I think I can remember where that might be, that you're bringing your own information into that photograph. There might be other people who'd actually gone there and photographed the cherry blossom at this time of year, or it might connect you with times you've photographed cherry blossom. The one in the top right is the AI image, which I created using Midjourney, which I think is very pretty. I used quite a simple prompt. Mostly, I'm prompting it to see what it comes up with, how it reacts to that combination of words. In this case, I was trying to get a pretty picture with cherry blossom in it, but there won't, it may still have attached you to memories of cherry blossom and times of years and or wind chimes and things associated with that. But no one will have experienced this particular scene because it never existed. Whereas I do differentiate that from the picture below, which I would call a photo of me. I always have blue hair in Second Life, as was indicated, standing in front of a cherry tree. And you'll have noticed I didn't say standing in front of a kind of pixelated, because I think of it as it's real to me. But also someone might look at that and say, oh, actually, I created that cherry tree. There's most things in Second Life are created by individuals, thousands and thousands of different people. A lot of things here are created by different Japanese creators, the cherry tree, the house in the background, the bluebells, I think the grass is probably, but they're all different creators. So even though someone might not have been in that particular spot in Second Life, they might still have associations with it. And I'm so obsessed with cherry blossom and Second Life. I actually did an article, a kind of witch guide to cherry blossom trees sold in Second Life. There is such a thing. That's an article in the Virtual Education Journal. But apart from revealing again my interest in Second Life, it's also thinking about the information which may be evoked as well as actually presented in different kinds of images, depending on how they were created. So to sum up, or you might have gathered from me, information is fascinating and complex concept. There's been huge amounts written about what it is from all sorts of different disciplinary perspectives. And I think it's worth thinking about what it means in a practice, because I think the information part of information literacy matters. And also, particularly if you do have an educational role, thinking about what does information mean to me and also what does information mean to other people, I think is a very important part of practice. So secondly, reflecting on information literacy. People who've done the information literacy module at Sheffield University will recognise this slide, that I've identified 7 ways of looking at information literacy. That first of all, that it is contextual. The exact meaning of information and information literacy will be subtly different for different people. It's a word or a phrase, and in particular, it's information literacy in the English-speaking countries and in a lot of literature, and in what you might call a colonialist way, because it's used in countries which are not majority English-speaking. But the way in which the phrases, the words used in other languages have, I think, a big influence on how it's conceived as well. The definitions, which are produced for all sorts of different purposes, where you're trying to capture the essence in a few words and kind of at least a sentence. And they may be produced for political reasons. They may be produced because you're trying to set some kind of standard. Scholars and researchers use them to position themselves or to kind of place themselves in the field. So there's different motivations there, which you end up having different kinds of definitions. As Pam had already flagged up, I've been talking about information literacy as a discipline. There are frameworks or models drawn up by expert groups, which are usually having some practical purpose that they're aiming to frame an educational curriculum for a particular group of learners. Also models discovered through research, and it's a practice which we practice every day. I don't think anyone is information illiterate. Everyone engages with information. You've got to engage in information to kind of live. But obviously there's different roles and different kinds of information literacy. And I think it is also something you can develop through life. I thought I'd briefly talk about the definition, which again Pam helpfully mentioned in the introduction, which Bill Johnston and I have discussed for kind of periodically. Are we going to write a new one? And in the end, although critiquing my own definition, I think certainly the emphasis here on identification is too narrow. But on the whole, and particularly with a kind of researcher position, it's quite useful to just kind of stick to it, and other people are using it, and so that's what we're sticking to at the moment. But I thought I'd expand on a few bits in that. For example, appropriate doesn't mean, oh, you've got to do all your searches properly. It means that in different circumstances, different things are appropriate. So if you're just vaguely interested in something, then asking AI or doing a Google search is fine, but probably not if you're really wanting to find out more about the health condition of a loved one. Also, channels and sources of information. I think we've already talked about that there's a huge way, in different ways in which you can obtain information through all sorts of channels. And also there's all sorts of ways you can engage with information. And there's been a lot more interest in avoiding and denying information. I think the polycrises have made more people want to avoid and deny information, but there's evidence in all sorts of areas of life, particularly healthcare. I really like acquiring information by bumping into it. It's one of the things I kind of count on, so that's interesting to me. And I see a big usefulness in linking information behaviour with information literacy, in that there's lots that you can learn from this research area. It's primarily a research area about the way people do engage and interact with information, which you can then bring into practice and teaching. And obviously there's lots of different needs which involve information in your life. And finally, we've got the wise and ethical use of information, which, again, something which has been debated here is about how people who are spreading what we might see as conspiracy theories, but for them, they're using information literacy in order to pull together the information and to disseminate it very effectively, share it very effectively. But I think the wise and ethical, you then have to decide what's wisdom to you. They might also feel that this is ethical, but there's a lot of areas concerned with that. Just coming back to the leaves, to say again that I'll be asking the students about whether they're willing to have these shared, and I've got water on this one, but yeah, so talking about these. And I do think it's a good idea to periodically reflect on what you think information literacy is to you personally. And this is where I'm hoping a video will work. It'll probably be silent because with my kind of battle with Microsoft and Google, I thought trying to have a battle with the sound system here as well was kind of a bridge too far. So these are quotations from research. First of all, again, the research on people's academics in marketing, engineering, chemistry, and English, a phenomenographic study looking at what they thought information literacy was and what teaching information literacy meant. And I took some of the favourite quotations from that and created an installation in Second Life, which also I bring people into so that they can then also look at them and then reflect on what it means to them. And then also my former PhD student, Dr. Shad Salha, was looking at Syrian school librarians' information literacy. She completed it just before the civil war in Syria and had to stay over here because she's an activist. So there's some quotations from her studies at the end. So, and I'm doing this because I find it interesting to think about what it means to other people, kind of trying to think about from their perspective. So that's saying information is just like this purple cloud that's out there, and you've got to go out and roll it back in and do something with it. That's from a marketing academic. And this was from an English academic saying it's about getting them to be information literate, to become it, a kind of birth. And then the academic laughed. This is marketing academic information is very significant in my profession. Being able to find information quickly and easily is very important. In business, nothing remains the same. One day the sky is blue, the next day it's green or red. You've always got to be on top of the news and pulling in information from every angle. And so information is vital, and being up to date with the information you're gathering is vital. Being on top of events. And that's, as you might gather, a marketing academic. And I was very pleased how I managed to actually make and these are quotations from Dr. Shahad Saha's investigation. And in Syria, teachers who were ill were often made into the librarians, so many of them weren't qualified librarians. If you asked me to locate information literacy, I'd locate it in the middle. It radiates light that enlightens our thoughts, our souls, our minds, and our morale. And finally, it opens my eyes to new horizons which I did not experience before as I was blind. I was not able to see anyone except myself, my thought, my ideas, and my life. Information literacy is to think out of the dark box and to see the sunlight. So, I mean, one of the things that was very interesting from that was the spiritual side of information literacy that was coming out with participants who saw their faith more as the central part of their life than some of the participants in some of the Western studies. So with information literacy, I'd say that acknowledging complexity is not the same as saying it means whatever you want it to mean, or it doesn't matter what you call it. I think it still does matter what you call it. But I think it's also good to acknowledge this complexity, and particularly with cultural differences in situations, being able to absorb that and see that as different signs of information literacy. So I'd say it's not the same as AI literacy, media and information literacy, and so forth. And there's a varying overlap between these. For example, with generative AI, I think there's a very strong overlap with information literacy. Whereas if you're looking at the kind of all the ways in which AI can be used in our lives, there's a much smaller overlap. I also wanted to highlight that media and information literacy is sometimes positioned as being broader, but having been involved, I would say it's not broader. To some extent, it's a very useful political construct, and I'm quoting here from the Council of Europe's Steering Committee on Media and Information Society, who are kind of articulating that role, which is very focused on kind of pragmatic issues, which include disinformation, misinformation at the moment. But it is more of that kind of construct rather than an organic or a disciplinary construct. Also, I was keen to say that I feel one should resist views of information that from other disciplinary areas that try and tidy information science or librarians or information literacy into a little box. And it's a tactic I recognize as now I am an academic. I started as a practitioner, but as an academic, I can recognize this. You're trying to establish your own area, and therefore you want to prove that you're doing something which is really amazing and new, and other people have tried this, but actually they weren't terribly good at it. And so quite often this involves having a really early citation, like Shannon and Weaver, a kind of classic information as kind of communication to do, and they came from mathematics. And then you ignore most of what's been done through there and kind of use that as a basis to dismiss it. And there's a very interesting book by David Buckingham, which I've got in my bag, but I left my bag over there, which has just come out. He's someone from media education and media literacy, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff in the book, but it did irritate me that in saying how important media education in particular, which distinguishes from media literacy, is, he just kind of dismisses this, apparently on the basis of reading one book and having a conversation with the authors and reading one extra paper, which is co-authored by the people he talked to. And then, again, kind of putting it in a box. And also Floridi, who, again, it's really interesting to read his work, and he's developed over time a very interesting thesis about this field called philosophy of information. But the way in which he dismisses is the kind of whole information field and doesn't cite it in any meaningful way, I would say. And also is quite patronizing about librarians. As I said, I recognize these academic tactics, but I think it's also important not to be intimidated by these kinds of tactics. And I'm criticizing these two because they're both very well established figures of my kind of age. Also, I know there may be a disjunct between your personal conception of information literacy and that of your employer. Actually, it should be employer rather than employee. It's one of the, I can't, because of the limited way in which we were able to use PowerPoint, I can't even change it. I don't think that was a Freudian slip either. Perhaps it was an autocorrect. Anyway, and I have reflected on how there's a disjunct between what my employer, obviously Sheffield University is a wonderful organisation and it pays my salary, and we, in the department, we do really, really good courses, and I hope that the students, ex-students here and students would agree with that. But at the very top level, I feel that, for example, this weird Rubik's Cube that we often use on our website, which talks about how we've got the largest food hall in Europe and a walkable city, and you think, well, where's actually the teaching and the learning? And they're in tiny little kind of written sideways on some of the blocks. And so I think, from my point of view, sometimes I feel there's this distance. So it's not just with information literacy, but I think it's possible to hold multiple conceptions and see quite pragmatically, this is the way it works here. And I'm working with these people who aren't familiar with information literacy. And so it might be useful to say, oh, right, yes, oh, that's what we call information literacy. Yes, I'm from that discipline, but yeah, I can see how this is overlapping. And then if you want to, if they want to use that terminology, and it might be useful for their students, for example, then using it, but kind of putting up a marker that there is something else there. And I thought I should make an advert for this, which is 3 times, Facet have said, this is 3 times the size of a normal book. That's why it's taking so long for us to actually get it out, because it's been announced for some time. And it has 60 or 70 kind of chapters in it. So just an advert for that. So the last couple of ones, I won't talk too much about roots because I'm aware that having started late, I need to finish fairly soon. But I wanted to acknowledge some groups in particular, thinking about how did I get here? What's the evolution of my information literacy? Because again, I think that's a useful thing to do. And it has been affected a lot by my PhD students. With Fusadi and Joseph, in particular, it was becoming more aware of how understanding and speaking English was actually an aspect of information literacy, because there's so much information in English, and so to succeed in an academic context, which both of them were looking at, you actually needed to be able to search and express yourself in English, and there's the colonialist aspects of that too. With Kondwani, where he was looking at the information experience of couples where one's got HIV and the other one hasn't, that was very illuminating in terms of where they got the information from, that their bodies were part of that. Those of them who were taking drugs and looked healthy were using their bodies as a testimonial that you should take the drugs because look at me, it can make you healthy again, as well as the influence of the religious leaders and various aspects were affecting their information choices. I've already talked about Shad, and Saida was looking at primary schools in Pakistan, which again was illuminating in terms of the lack of resources and also the tie-up with the home and the dynamics in the home and how that impacted it. In terms of my own students, one thing has been people from, in particular, countries which have high censorship, saying how valuable they think information literacy is, that obviously there's basic things. I'm thinking of conversations about, is information literacy a basic human right? And whereas some people from richer countries would say, oh, no, I realize that food and so forth is more important. But actually people from those circumstances would often say, you need the information, you need education and information in order to be able to get to a better circumstance. And I'll also just mention the conference, which was lifelong learning conferences, which took place in Australia in the early 2000s. And that's Mandy Lupton and Christine Bruce and Bill Johnston and Sylvia Edwards. It was a group of phenomeноgraphers exploring, and Christine was the kind of founder in the late 90s in her work in exploring varying conceptions of information literacy. But it was the palm trees and the sun when I was looking back through my old photographs thing. Yes, perhaps I like those Australian conferences, not just for what was going on, but actually it was a really nice conference in the sun. But they were already focusing on things like social justice and LGBTQ+ and information and lifelong learning. I will mention something that's covered in one of the chapters in the handbook, which is thinking about a discipline and the roots and the knowledge base that I came across an article by Harland, who's in the higher education sector, who was talking about higher education as an open access discipline, meaning that you could actually get into it and start contributing to it without having a long education beforehand, which, for example, is not possible for a theoretical physicist. And he categorized the contributors to the discipline of higher education. And so I won't go through these in detail because of the time, but I will be putting the slides up and linking them to my blog afterwards, and obviously they'll be available in due course on the LILAC website as well. But I identified various groups, obviously starting with people like me and other people here who are LIS researchers and spend a good deal of time on that, but also the huge numbers of part-time researchers, people who, like you, probably the majority of people here, who are practitioners, but may also be doing some research, sometimes through formal study, but more often in small-scale studies as part of your work and publishing. Also teachers in different disciplines who are sometimes co-authoring together. There's quite a lot of that. People who place themselves in another disciplinary field, very often education, but might be contributing to information literacy. And I'll pick up there also the policy and civil service society researchers, such as international institutes and agencies like the Good Things Foundation in the UK. And so there are already these contributors to the knowledge base, and I think it's very important to draw on the knowledge base, identifying the insights and evidence from IL research that can shape definitions and frameworks. So this is partly triggered by attending a seminar about the revisions to the ACRO framework, and I think quite often in these exercises, there's, as there should be, a lot of attention to what's going out in the outside world that we need to take account of, like AI is the obvious one, and also things to do with values of the profession, but sometimes not that much looking back at what's the research that's been done that could help improve this definition or this framework, because around the world there's a lot of PhD work, and there's the huge number of professional articles and research articles coming out. And I won't read out the whole of that the quotation there, but that's from Daniel Miller, who's an ethnographer in the digital field, and he was writing an epilogue to a book which is open access from UCL. They're really good book series from UCL. In which it's about digital repertoires. It's about acknowledging the digital capabilities that people already have and not assuming they're deficient, but rather examining what they're doing. And he coordinated a very big worldwide program of looking at how older people are using smartphones. But anyway, in the quotation, he's pointing out how frustrating he feels because people in the digital area tend to ignore the previous research and kind of grab the latest new thing as if nothing relevant had ever been done about it before. I think that kind of leaches in sometimes to the library and information scene concerning technology. And it's a problem, I think, often comes from managers who see technology as the solution to all the things that are going wrong and enthusiastically kind of jump on the bandwagon. So I think it's stronger when you're, and this is another photo from the behind the tram stop, connected with your roots. And if you're connected with your roots, you might be better placed to deal with polycrisis. This was, in fact, something I put together when I was giving a talk in Europe just after the UK had decided on Brexit. And so it's kind of expressed my feelings through making this installation in Second Life. And it's been defined as the causal entanglement of crises in multiple global systems in ways that significantly degrade humanity's prospects. And I've got some of you may be very familiar with this. There's this, how close are we to midnight? The Science and Security Board of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which was set up with Einstein and various other luminaries. And I think they wish now they'd probably set it. I mean, most of them are dead now, but I think the whole movement might wish they'd start off earlier because they're getting closer and closer to midnight in terms of this could be the end of the world because of what we're doing to ourselves and the way in which these interact. And at the moment, the information aspect is kind of making the whole thing worse. And this is a quotation from The Guardian, pointing out how the war in Iran lands in an information ecosystem that already primed for grotesque detachment. All events from the mundane to high octane are flattened into feed. I thought that was quite a nice expression. You can toggle between recipes and influences and those White House videos and scenes of smoke rising from Tehran, Doha, Dubai. When the true and the false jostle constantly in the content slipstream, nothing feels real, which I think is an aspect of polycrisis that you're all aware of. I was thinking back to the changes. In fact, it was mostly when it was AI, because AI is very much implicated into these problems, of changes in my life. So when I went to university, we did everything by hand because people didn't have computers. There was a computer in the university, and it was in a big room, which was kind of air-conditioned. And you fed things onto it in cards, and it came out on green-lined paper. And so in my life, there's been lots of things which have changed possibilities for life dramatically. And there is always this kind of hype cycle that this is going to change everything forever, and it does change things, but I have lived through some things which are also quite kind of big. But I'm also thinking back to people who kind of at the start of different kinds of digital innovations. And Zukovsky is 1974 is often cited as the foundational information literacy reference because he was chair of the Information Industry Association, which is a trade association for people in the information industry, which in those days you could actually confine, and there were conferences that could fit into an exhibition hall that were the whole of the online information industry. But I was thinking how at that point the organisations, which did include, for example, Lockheed, which made armaments and online databases, so it wasn't just public sector organisations, but they produced and they spun, they kind of offered, made available the data. What comes out of that from Zukovsky is educate the people for information literacy so they can buy our products. They want our products capable of using them. So there was kind of a relationship between commerce. Then when Google came in, which I also knew about because at the time I was doing a lot of seminars about how to use search engines effectively, and Google was quite exciting. But then it's got this very vague vision of don't be evil. So it's just something which you can, who decides what evil is, and then they abolish the slogan altogether. It's very usefully vague. And then you've got Facebook, which was started up so you could find hot dates. And so I was thinking the kind of ethos for each of the people kind of stimulating these new changes in society had, in fact, kind of degrading, depreciating relationships with that. And that seemed to be part of the problem. So finally, reflecting on information literacy in a time of polycrisis and cherry blossom, I wanted to use another couple of Shard slides from when we did a presentation together as an INFLA pre-conference in 2014. She worked a lot from the UK with people who were still back in Syria, providing kind of information advice and connecting people in Syria so they could provide information for very practical things to do with growing plants and also getting out of the country. And so she said it would mean giving activists the candle to give people the light to survive in the land of death. And also saying that active citizenship in the Syrian context, and this is from her, taken from her thesis, involves acquiring the skills, attitudes, and social intelligence to be able to support other Syrians with information sources, information advice as needed. And so I've used those because Syria was all, when she was interacting, was kind of deep in the crisis that was tearing it apart. Also, Bill and I have proposed the idea of a curriculum for our Media and Information Literate Life course, individuals reflecting on their information literacy contexts, an ongoing process of identifying our strengths, and so we've used that model, which we first conceived of in 2000 and published in 2000, and then we've worked on it over the years, thinking about drawing back and thinking of the various elements of what's changing in your life, and being situationally aware is a phrase that we use. And so I think by using kind of being aware of these issues, by thinking and encouraging others to be situationally aware, to think about the information around them, how they want to engage with that information, whether they're perfectly happy as they're in a current information world or whether they want to develop. You could also try and engage communities and influence government so that people can generate a curriculum vitae, a course for life, for lifelong information literacy development, and seeing information literacy as a discipline to enable life. So thank you, that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, so we've just got time for a couple of questions. Yeah. So I think I'll start with this one. How can information literacy prepare learners for decision-making in a polycrisis world?
I think it's difficult. Yes, so I mean, a lot of what all of you are doing at the moment is contributing towards that. Obviously, I think that actually making people aware that the way that they engage with information, their information literacy, is a thing they need to develop. And one of the issues at the moment, and to be a bit critical, I would say, for example, in the graduate attributes in Sheffield, it used to actually have information literacy in there, but it's kind of now distributed, and I can see the information literacy. But I think actually drawing those things together, and it may be in your institution, you have to badge that as something slightly different. I think still saying, kind of finding out whether you can get the information literacy term into it, but also looking to connect with parents, parents and guardians, community groups, so that thinking about the way, if you're kind of in the school world and kind of advocating, can you connect with other organizations that could be helping to develop people feeling okay about engaging with information, and that does mean not just social media. I think it's important not to see social media as just one thing, because people are experiencing social media in a context, and they're being given signals like parents who are on their phones all the time, but telling their children not to use their phones, and it's difficult to deal with. But I think thinking of it in the round like that, also getting people to talk about the information in their worlds and what's important to them. And I haven't talked much about the fact I'm really interested in information behaviour and information literacy and computer gaming, and about 60 to 70 of my master's students have focused on that for their dissertations. And that's one way in which you can get people kind of enthused if they're gamers. They're using information in a really sophisticated way. And also dealing with kind of mini polycrises sometimes, getting killed a lot and so forth in their games. So I think that finding out from them, and then so that you can make a connection and connections with people outside your immediate area, but I mean, we're not paid enough to do that really, but I think that's useful.
Brilliant, thank you, Sheila. And quite a big one here. What should our role as librarians be in the future?
Yeah, I'm immediately stumped because I coordinate a module called Personal and Professional Development, which has got a lot of stuff about the role of the, what you want your role to be. So I think people, as I said, looking again, there was a moment where one of my colleagues said, "Oh, so you've been in the department for a quarter of a century," which was kind of, I stepped back a bit, thought, no, I'll own this. I've been actually teaching people to search online for nearly half a century, but I've lost my track there. But I think thinking about that, ever since I was professionally engaged, which was quite early on, there have been conferences saying kind of, wither the role of the librarian. And so it's just changing all the time. But I certainly think that this issue of how you engage with information is very much part of the role of the librarian. And yes, it is a matter of, I think, of not getting, not allowing yourself to be put down because some new things come in, but kind of stepping back and thinking, well, how does that fit in? Do I need to change my idea of what my role is? Are there some exciting new roles out there? It's kind of proactive, so I'm just blithering now, aren't I? But I mean, it's kind of standard for how you want, if you want to actually enjoy your job, a way that you need to engage with it to be kind of a mixture of kind of proactive and open to new ideas, but not being blindsided by ideas or overwhelmed by them.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sheila. So I think we'll finish there and have some lunch. So thanks very much, Sheila.